Let's go. Let's go. Why does it sound so low, babe? Is it me or? Sorry. What's up, people? Book clubbers, both are up now. Both archives are up. Go get it. Oh, after the show, of course. We're going to take a look at the weekend polling data. A little over 3,000 responses from Friday to Sunday. Because Rich was curious as to whether or not Trump's approval rating would fall. And that's where we are. Did Trump's approval rating fall? We're going to find out on Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit, and I'm glad to be here today. Look, if you missed the book club, don't forget to go check out the archive recordings. I threw them both up the week prior, which was too long. I got them to increase the upload size, so I was able to do it without reducing the quality. And then yesterday's, which was a really good one. We are reading, of course, Nations and Identities. Do not forget, if you are a member on YouTube or a supporter on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com, book club, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Time, whatever you want to say, on Sundays. Okay? And if you are in the book club, then you kind of saw as I was looking over some of those responses that were shuffling in. There's a lot going on, right? So Trump is just clearly flooding the zone. There's a lot going on, and the left is struggling to figure out how to respond. The right is tempted, and look, I even criticize people I consider to be, friends. I mean, they're just, if they're deserving of criticism, they get it. There's a temptation on the right to give them direction. And it's unbelievable. They're the only party in this party system anyway. They're the only party who helps their enemy when their enemy is faltering. Even after their enemy tries to kill them, put them in jail, make them rot in prison for the rest of their life, arrest their grandma and grandpa, throw them in jail for the rest of their lives, have more political prisoners than Vladimir Putin rotting in jail. And yet they win in this massive debate, or at least the one man who leads the party did. And they're tempted to screw it all up and give it all back because they're a stupid party. And the people who get into positions of influence or have a voice, let's call it a bullhorn of some sort, they're also very stupid people. All right, so let's get into what happened over the weekend, and then we'll talk a little bit, about this flooding of the zone. We're talking about reinstating people who were booted out of the military because of a vaccine mandate. We're talking about ending the careers of people who are delusional over their gender. We're talking about getting into a trade war that was never going to happen with Colombia, which they embarrassingly misspelled. But I ask you, folks, what's worse? What's more embarrassing? some low-level staffer misspelling Columbia and nobody catching it, which should have been. It was an embarrassing mistake. Or having somebody, well, that's somebody, some low-level presidential staffer who works for the president, but nobody who works for the president at all catching that they misspelled it. Or the president himself being so retarded, he can't say the word Columbia. Which one's worse? The hypocrisy on both sides is astounding, but the left is truly, truly something to behold. All right. And a whole lot of other stuff that he's doing, and he's moving at light speed. And here's the left's problem. Here's what they don't understand this time. I'm going to actually blend these topics together by running a clip, which I'm going to use to criticize the new vice president. But then we'll roll into the bigger picture of it all, because they meaning the left, and I'm using that term to wrap up the media, to wrap up all the social media people, the influencers, the activists, right? Those so-called civil rights activists who are all over Twitter every time there's a Republican president now, They're the same people, that Morgan Freeman dude that I always respond to because he's just textbook stupid. They don't understand this is in 2017. The difference now is that the American public agrees with Donald Trump and what he's doing. There's their problem. And in 2017, if you asked people, for instance, do you support Trump's wall? You would probably get a rather even split, maybe a little positive, maybe a little negative, depending on what time, what was the news cycle. But using the phrase Trump wall elicited the same kind of reaction that using the phrase Obamacare did when you were polling them. If you polled the nature of these positions, you would find that Americans overwhelmingly supported them, such as with the Trump wall. Do you support a physical barrier at the southern border with Mexico or whatever it may be? And in the case of Obamacare, if you simply polled the nature of the law, especially pre-existing conditions, even if you called it the Affordable Care Act, you would get a much, much more positive response than if you called it Obamacare. All right. And this time, none of that matters. This time, you could call it the Trump wall, and it's going to get a huge, huge majority in support of it. You could say mass deportations, and it doesn't matter. They're going to support Trump removing people who came here especially during the Biden administration, illegally. Right? So the crying of Selena Gomez on TikTok, and I'm so sorry, I don't do it again. I mean, just this hysterics. Selena, you look and sound like an imbecile, like a unhinged, unstable, immature little girl. That's what you sound like and look like. The country's past the sensationalism and the antics and the shenanigans. They just watched for 4 years their country be invaded en masse. And as my wife pointed out, I mean, Americans know, like what Laura tweeted, which I would never be able to get away with tweeting, but what Laura tweeted is absolutely true, number one. And number two, what the majority of Americans are going to say when they see Selena crying, right? And they trot out Morgan and they trot out Selena and they just don't get it. Like, Americans this time support him and they support what he's doing. When we get into it over the weekend, I'm like, this is going to fall a little bit at some point. It did not. And there are a few of us who now, because after we released our poll, there was at least 2 others that came out showing similar numbers. And even before that, by the way, I was unaware that Matt Towery found almost identical numbers that we're seeing for Trump right now. Mark Mitchell, is concerned. He's understating Trump's approval rating. And Spence over at Emerson has Trump positive in New Jersey. And I'm telling you, folks, he cannot be positive in New Jersey if his nationwide approval rating is not in the mid 50s. Like, it has to be. Okay. So, of course, I'm right. And I'm wondering, is this going to fall at any point soon? Around the level you see from like Reuters and YouGov. And like, folks, these people suck. Their polling sucks. I don't know why anyone even harps on them anymore, does segments on CNN about them, other than, with the explicit intent of misleading people. Trump's approval rating is very high. They're trying to provide cover for two groups of people. One, Democratic senators, but I mean, the Democratic congressmen and women in general, but especially Democratic senators. And what's the word other than the betrayer Republican class who is waiting for Trump to get unpopular so they can stab him in the back again. They're trying to give them cover so that they can do whatever it is they feel they are going to get away with to oppose Donald Trump. And the fact of the matter is, right now, it's political suicide to oppose Donald Trump on issues like immigration or the economy, to put out things that say, like, Trump's been, look, since Trump's been president, eggs have gone up, and we're going to pay more for coffee because of Colombia. There's no such thing as a trade war with Colombia, okay? Like, there would not be a hot war, a cold war, any kind of war with Colombia, because they can't do it. All right. Trade wars with like China and India can be concerning. But this idea that Trump isn't going to bury them in negotiations within a 24-hour period and they're going to cave is ludicrous. They have two products that come out of that country. Two. And one is illicit. And they got taken over by Mexico. Anyway, recently, they can't afford a trade war with the United States of America. And it's a little silly or dishonest or both to entertain the idea that they could. It's ridiculous. It's like arguing, Germany's going to go to the mat with us over a pipeline or something. No, they're not. Not if you push them. Or over their contributions to NATO. No, they're not. Not if they know you're serious. They're going to cave because they have no effing choice. Headline, by the way, on Real Clear Politics right now is Colombian leader offers presidential plane for deportation flights. Colombia backs down. Trump claims U.S. is respected again. No shit, Sherlock. All right. Over the weekend, as we're doing this polling, of course, J.D. Vance gives his first interview to the media or anyone since becoming the vice president. Ridiculously, I'm sorry, but it's just true. Ridiculously, J.D. Vance gives the interview to CBS News, an organization that worked, especially, by the way, Margaret Brennan is a Democratic activist pretending to be a journalist, a serial liar and fabricator, all right, a serial hack water carrier. And they give this interview to CBS News instead of, at the very least, Fox News. But I wouldn't even have done that. And the only reason why I'd entertain it is because at this point, there could be more persuadable Democratic voters. Forget about independents because that's sealed. That's a done deal. Watching Fox News outside of network and other competitor cable news channels. Nobody's watching CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, or MSNBC anymore. Nobody's watching them. Their ratings are beyond bad. They're not sustainable. If the media doesn't figure out something soon, they're going to have to rely on some kind of dark money, which, by the way, many of them already do, like Fox. Seed money from members of the Saudi royal family who have questionable ties. CNN with Bahrain, right? And Qatar. We all know the story. But it's going to come down to advertising soon. I mean, MSNBC is going to be sold piecemeal at an auction soon. So my question is, why didn't you give the first interview to, I don't know, say Joe Rogan? Someone who not only actually has viewers, is not your political enemy, and probably did more to get you elected than, I mean, if you had 5 fingers that you had to allocate, if you had to say, I got to mention 5 media platforms that had one of the biggest impacts on the election, you got to put Rogan in one of these 5. Hell, even Charlie Kirk, who not only has a popular show, but had you on when others would not have you on, and chase ballots all over the state of Arizona so you could win by a pretty significant, comfortable margin. Like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me why they feel the need to resuscitate their dying political enemies. And that's what you're doing, because you're not only rewarding your political enemies, and they are your political enemies. You're not only rewarding them, but you're doing so without any chance of winning over anybody, because nobody who's watching that program is going to be persuadable anyway, at least not right now. All you're doing is giving them a chance to win back viewers that they have lost because of a credibility deficit. All right. Maybe I'll give Face the Nation another try. All right. Maybe I'll give Meet the Press another try, whatever network you choose to go on. Let them suffocate. They are the proverbial fish who, in their lunacy, jumped out of the fishbowl and is now flopping around out of water in the open air, suffocating. And you come over and get fish breath given them mouth to mouth? What the hell is wrong with this team? There is zero upside. Zero. And to those who say, well, I would love to watch him just batter around Margaret, that's great. But again, you're giving them a chance to win back or attract back some viewers that they currently have lost post 24 and really have no idea how to get back. And just before I play the clip, in all honesty, this concept they're not understanding, that they really need a significant reform to the Democratic Party platform in order to fix this problem they have. It can only be avoided by one thing. It's only avoidable under one circumstance. And that is the Republican Party doing what they do best. Sabotage themselves. Screw themselves up. Bring their dying or dead political opponents back from the dead like they're the political Jesus Christ. Lazarus, wake up. I cannot explain it to you. It's had no upside, but let's watch it. And I thought that this one line was particularly relevant.
Wall Street Journal and
let's go back. And this one line was particularly relevant. Make it big screen. All right. Cut one.
both the Wall Street Journal and the National Review, conservative publications, as you know.
Let's hear that again, shall we?
Wall Street Journal and the National Review, conservative publications, as you know.
Stop. Is that true? Is that true? Is the Wall Street Journal and National Review, are either of them conservative publications? No. The Wall Street Journal is part of Murdoch, Inc. They hate Donald Trump. They actively worked against Donald Trump. The Murdoch signature is quite literally on what you can only call some creepy pact that all of these moguls, these media and corporate moguls, signed from Wall Street to K Street to anywhere I shit on Main Street. Like, weird, creepy pact that we're all going to sign to recognize that we are collectively working to defeat Donald Trump and elect Kamala Harris. I mean, the weird stuff. The Murdoch name is on that pact. Yes, obviously, Fox News is part of the family. So, and by the way, enough said. You still think Fox News is conservative? I would argue even Sean Hannity's not conservative anymore. Or not MAGA conservative. He's not. I mean, he plays a good game, but he's not. Sean Hannity's for Sean Hannity. Always has been. And that leaves what? Mark Levin, who's more like a Ted Cruz conservative. Does he even have a show over there anymore? I don't know. I don't watch it. Maybe like Harris Faulkner, who's not allowed to really say what she wants to say anyway half the time. And Laura Ingraham jumped off the Trump train with the quickness to back DeSantis, only to put the chameleon face back on and get back on the Trump train the minute she realized it wasn't going to happen. It's nothing conservative about Fox News or any. Like the New York Post, I would argue, is probably the fairest, most, I don't even want to say conservative, just the fairest of all of the Murdoch family, media family. If the Wall Street Journal is a warmongering, anti-tariff, big government pushing, pro-Wall Street water carrying rag. It is not what it used to be. It is a neocon publication. So is the National Review, which was started by a commie, right? I mean, or with the help of a commie. So give me a break. Neoconservatism has absolutely nothing in common with conservatism other than a root word. They mean two totally different things. And one, neoconservatism, has pretended to be right-wing for decades in the post-Reagan era, and they got away with it until Donald Trump came along. The idea JD wouldn't immediately stop Margaret and go, no, I don't agree. I know he doesn't want bad headlines, but would he have said that during the campaign? Probably. So now he's vice president. He's not gonna push back on that. Conservative, my ass. Nothing conservative about them. Who was the National Review crap? Jonah Goldberg, right before he got ran out of town. Rich Lowry, right? All these people. Come on, man, get out of here. George Will types, Charles Krauthammer types, Bill Kristol types. Bite me. I don't want to go on your stupid cruise, okay? So you can drone on about how smart you are. No, thank you. All right, so back to it. You and I agree, right? No, I disagree. Nothing conservative. And by the way, they all pushed the Iraq War. How could you possibly be conservative? Pardon me for a second. How could you possibly be a conservative, even by the quote traditional definition, if you believe and pushed and advocated for nation building and even still do? How could you possibly call yourself a conservative if you think or argue, at least you supposedly do, that government is inherently flawed? It is inherently corrupt, obviously, because of power, right? But it is also incompetent, right? So Rand Paul once said, and is absolutely correct, when he stood up, he was a freshman senator at the time, and he was like, how could you possibly think that you are conservative if you believe in nation building? And he didn't really elaborate because it didn't really need any elaboration. So, like, obvious, it's self-evident. If government is ineffective, if it's corrupt, if it's incompetent, then why the hell would you think that you could nation build abroad? It can't solve problems at home. It's going to use the primacy of U.S. power to shape the world and its image. Get the hell out of here. Nothing conservative about that philosophy at all. They are and have always been expansionist lefties. Maybe when we get a second, we can educate everyone on the actual definition of fascism while I'm at it, but not right now.
Have been critical of Tulsi Gabbard. The review called her an atrocious nominee who deserves to be defeated. They compared her defense of Edward Snowden, the fugitive who stole U.S. secrets, to an attorney general who thinks the mob gets a bad rap. Her refusal to accept U.S. intelligence findings that Assad gassed his own people, they said, was like a nominee for OMB director not being able to count.
Okay, so if you are critical of the intelligence sector in any way, shape, or form, as if these people collaborated with the intelligence agencies to lie to us, to get us into a war that was an unjust and illegal war, and they're legit arguing that if you question their credibility at all, then you're disqualified for holding any kind of intelligence community post, especially a cabinet post. If that is the standard, folks, then what's to stop the intelligence agency from running roughshod over all of us? The intelligence community, excuse me. There's nothing in place to oversee whether or not the IC is abusing their authority. And if you're somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who had a real come to Jesus moment, you're talking about a woman who served her country, right? Was a liberal, was a Democrat for a very long time, who had an awakening, opened her eyes, got called erroneously, by the way, slanderous. And by the written too, slander, libel, whatever, all of it. Allegations she's a traitor, a Russian asset or something. In fact, I think that's the perfect person to have in charge of the flow of information in the intelligence community. We have had nothing but friends of the IC, except for Ratcliffe. We've had nothing but friends of the IC in that post for years. Maybe it's time to try something new. Because under the standard, the National Review and the Wall Street Journal, also pointed out, you can't have a reformer. You can't have a skeptic. If you question them, and by the way, there are reports, independent reports from international organizations that they supposedly love, that in fact question Assad's responsibility in one of those chemical gas attacks. That's the one she's always referred to. Glenn Greenwald has done a lot of reporting on this. So is Aaron Mate. You don't just outright dismiss it because the intelligence community says it's not true. They lie a lot. It's ridiculous. And if that's the standard, we're screwed. We're screwed. We're inevitably a deep state country, a deep state run country, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing. Nothing we'll ever be able to do about it. All right, I'm going to have to kill Real Clear Politics here because it is really slowing me down, let me tell you. Real Clear Politics is awesome, but it's got a lot of resources on it. There we go. See, it looks better already. All right, so let's go back to it. Look, she still hasn't conceded that Assad was responsible for the gas attacks. This was like a nominee for OMB director not being able to count. No, it's not. Being able to count is something you can verifiably do, and you can check whether or not the OMB is bullshitting you with their numbers and their projections. That's ridiculous. If you don't blindly trust the intelligence community, it's the same thing as not being able to count. Such a stupid argument. They make all these cute little platitudes and shit. They're intellectually retarded, though. And I mean that like stunted in that sense. Because they never progress. There's no advancing of their intellectual position. And when somebody butts up against it, they do that. They don't actually make a good argument. They name call. And they do it in a way which they think makes them sound intelligent. When you really can just see that they're masking that their argument is feeble. Name calling or insulting is still the same thing. It doesn't matter if you have the cojones to outright come and do it, or play cute little word games like the smart people at National Review who haven't gotten a single foreign policy decision or position right in decades since their existence. You know how many votes National Review has gotten? 0. You know the impact of National Review is on our national discourse? Nothing. Nobody reads National Review and goes, you know what? I think I'm going to convert to Republicanism. Quite the opposite, if anything. Quite the opposite. All right, let's finish this.
Any of this give you pause putting her in charge of the U.S. intelligence community? Yes or no?
No, Margaret, look, these are publications that attacked Donald J. Trump obsessively, but those publications don't determine who the president is, the
and
American people
supported
do.
Him.
And Donald J. Trump is the person who determines who his cabinet is, not these publications that I think, frankly, have lost relevance.
Yeah, okay, and let me just stop that there. I mean, that's all very well, nice, well and said, JD, truthfully. However, and she sneaks in there, ultimately supported him. The National Review did not support Trump. There's a difference between rolling over like a bitch because you know you're defeated and you might as well submit, and having the courage to actually support somebody. They did not support Donald Trump. Beating him over the head day in and day out until you come to realize at the end he's going to win, so you might as well endorse him, is not supporting him. Everything all right? I hear yelling. So there it is. And again, but I would argue this. It's an interesting point that JD made, that these people have lost relevance, and that's all very well and good, and that's all very true. But you know who else lost relevance, JD? CBS News. CBS News. So why the hell would you give them your first interview? I don't understand it. I totally, I just don't get it. My father. He's a pip. Love my old man. He's a pip. Must be watching. Sorry, Dad, for the foul language. But while he's right about that, he kind of kills the entire argument that people in the administration are making by saying, well, you know, we still want to reach out to certain people. Why? And if you do want to reach out, if I understand correctly who it is that you want to reach out to and speak to, then why are you on CBS News? Who cares? Nobody's watching. Those people aren't watching CBS News. You know who still watches CBS News outside of liberals that you have no chance to persuade? The educated white senior that once upon a time was flower power generation. It's true. Or the kids of, that are now older and are making senior vote more of a swing vote than it has been in the past. They are the ones who have, in fact, the highest strongly disapproval rating of Donald Trump in the entire country. 18 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 64, 65 to 74, and 75 plus. Out of all of those categories, 65 and above has the highest strongly disapproval rating of any of those groups. Younger people who we know can be, you know, Trump did very well with them. His numbers look like he's attracting them. The right as a whole has a unique and very real opportunity to expand their tent to include a lot more younger people who are the future, and they're not watching CBS News. So they're not reaching them there. JD Vance isn't going to reach them there. Outside of maybe clips that they will see on shows like mine or shows like Charlie, where they're replaying something from Face the Nation. They're not actually going to watch Face the Nation. So what's the point of making Charlie play the clip again? Why didn't you just go on Charlie's show? Why didn't you just go on Rogan? Right? I'm sure you could go to Barron right now and he will give you 5 shows where those kids are watching, and you will get your message out to them. And is politically speaking, the most persuadable independent in this country is actually like working 30 to 54 kind of independence. And if you're going to go on TV, if you're going to suck up to network or cable news, at least do it on Fox, because that's the network they watch the most. And in fact, it's really not even close. So they really can't afford to make too many more of these mistakes, is my point. Let them die. Let them suffocate. Proverbial, folks. I don't want to see media. People's Pundit said, kill CBS News people. Figuratively speaking, let them die a political death and a business death. The business model in the media and the corporate media is broken. It has been broken for a while. The only thing that has kept them afloat all of these years is their ability to attract money from people who want them to influence elections. That's it. It's the only way Nate Silver was able to keep his website for all of those years. ABC, they can't afford it now. The guy was running a $6 million red deficit every year on that stupid website. They kept him around because he was impacting betting odds, narrative, polling, and ultimately perception. Let it die. Soon as they lose their ability to do that, they'll lose the ability to even stay on the air. Many of them. And they will have to, if they want to remain on the air, they will have to reform themselves into something that does not resemble what they have been for many years now. And I could turn back time, what would that look like? It could look like something that CNN looked like in the early 2000s, maybe. It's never going to be fair. It's corporate media. The people who pay their bills and keep their lights on have the most lobbyists on K Street. You can't get through a commercial on Fox News or CNN without seeing some commercial for some pharmaceutical drug. You can't do it. Pfizer, Merck, Moderna, right? They are all over those channels. So, it's not realistic to say that they're ever going to be credible again, because they won't be until that model completely fails. But my God, why give them... I'm saying you're not even giving them a hand up. Like I said, you're like getting down on your knees and giving them mouth to mouth. You're putting your lips against filth. I'd rather kiss the floor at Newark Airport than resuscitate those SOBs. And I don't really see what the hell they were thinking when they decided to do this. All right. Here's the good news for them. Let's look in if there's some new ones. We're going to find out together, because I turned it off last night after I was done with book club. Yeah, it doesn't look like there are new ones. What are the dates here? Let's pop it up. This is the 23rd to the 26th. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Ooh, look at that. Nice little viewership on the community. Nice. All right. Book clubbers, you kind of saw this. I don't think it changed at all. As soon as we got off, I said, all right, only people who are in the middle of completing their interview, the rest have to go, and we're done. We're done. 2 reasons. One, I really wanted this to be all post swearing in, all with Trump in office, doing his stuff in office, um, et cetera, et cetera. And there was some, just because it's part of our methodology, how we have people who can take a little bit of time to make sure that their survey is completed. We don't force them to do it in 10 minutes if they simply can't. We had to keep some wording, and then eventually, when those people were all done and phased out, we changed the question to strictly, do you approve or disapprove as of his handling of the job as president right now, even though I don't know why purging the cache isn't showing that, but it will when I export it. But probably right now, because I created the report to track responses, it's going to show the original wording. And yeah, I mean, look, and then also the second part of why I did it, not only to basically average out people who may have been either before or during the ceremony. I wanted it all after. Now it's going to be a rolling average that's completely post swearing in, and I mean the day of. I mean, this is January 23rd to the 26th. This is the end of the week. And it doesn't include anybody who was in our prior. And that's important. That's kind of what I'm trying to explain. And then the second part of it is why I ended it yesterday is because of money. I mean, it's not cheap, right? The bottom line is this is actually a larger total sample than what we got in the first one. It's not by much, but it's like 60 something more than the first one. Let me look. No, not quite. Not quite. More like 30, but same thing. And that's the totality of it. I'm actually comparing people, some of which will be screened out. Like, for instance, we went over this yesterday too in book club. Like, if you say that you didn't vote, no, that's not true. You wouldn't be removed for that reason. But we all dedupe the vote history, and we'll make sure. Here's a big finding. We still have yet. Oh, here we go. The reason why, just so everyone knows, I always get these questions. The reason why the overall sample is larger than the number you see for the recalled 2024 presidential vote is because not everybody in the sample voted in 2024. Of course, there will be new people. There will be people who sat it out. You're never going to get 100% turnout. But the population that we're surveying is, of course, voters that are eligible, right? The eligible voting population, the EVP, right? So it's the registered voter universe, and they may not have voted. But of those who did vote in 2024, we ask, of course, the recalled vote. You can see that actually this is slightly more accurate than the first poll, the poll that was released last week. Trump got in this 50.3%. That is almost identical. We're talking about 0.4 of a percentage point off of the actual result. So very, very close. But look at Harris. 44.6%. That's it. Well, Harris didn't get 44.6%. So what's going on here? Perfect time to explain why I don't wait for recall to vote. It is valid to criticize a pollster over their recalled vote sample if it is crazy out of whack with reality. But I personally, and I know there's a debate over this, just like there's a debate over waiting for party. I personally do not wait by recalled vote for a few reasons. One is more like a practical thing, right? I would say, no, it's more like a technical thing. Well, what do you do with the new people? You're making assumptions about people who did not vote, right? So, and how much of the share of the sample they're going to make up. And you're making you end up making, to put it very short and sweet, you end up making very big assumptions about a very small amount of the overall sample. And I don't like making assumptions that big. That's too significant for me. What do you do? You're going to leave blank values in the weighting variable for those who did not vote in 24. And I don't like that. You're also, by its very nature of doing that, you're going to decrease your weighting efficiency, which is legitimate, which is quite simply a percentage, right? 95%, 98% weighting efficiency. The lower the percentage, the higher the risk of error of doing something incorrect, right? In layman's terms, getting it wrong. And then the second reason why is not technical. It is more practical. People lie. And here you can see people are lying. All right. We know that this is actually really fairly representative, even for a raw sample. We know it is. Why? Because Donald Trump's vote share is almost identical to his actual vote share. And this is one anecdote. You go and you look at other variables. Does gender look good? Does race look decent? Does age look right? Does party, you can look and see if there's a red flag, but et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, ideology, conservatism fell again. It was what, 31 in our last poll, 32 maybe? It fell again. Maybe it was a little bit over, just over 30, but now it's 29. This is a pattern. And I think we kicked around some ideas in book club yesterday after we were done with the actual book and we were just having a conversation. And I think that we were touching on the right themes about why conservatism is falling. And it's worth exploring. And we're going to have to kick around some ideas about questions on how we're going to make sure that we perhaps ask follow-ups that will provide us with responses that can help us understand this better. But I think the general idea is this. I think we're going to find out something along the lines like this. Most of the decline in conservatism explains almost the entirety of the increase in moderate identification. And I think two things need to happen. One is, not the least of which, we need a follow-up question after ideology, the typical ideology question. And we need more like a Likert scale, but we need to say, okay, you're moderate. Are you moderately liberal? Would you consider yourself moderately liberal? Are you, or actually something more like, are you truly moderate? Which one best describes why you chose moderate, right? That you're truly moderate and that's it. Or no, you're really moderately liberal, like in general, generally speaking. Or you're moderately conservative, but you are uncomfortable picking either one of those two options. And then that'll tell us a little bit more, right, about what these people, same thing we do with independent identification. When somebody says they're an independent or there's something else, we say, okay, we get that. We understand what you're saying, but tell us, do your views, are they more closely aligned with the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, or maybe a little, they're equal to both, or maybe you have nothing in common with either of these parties? Like that kind of follow-up question, I think we need to start to do to ideology, because I think what we're going to find is this. There is a new MAGA moderate, all right? Because even as more people say they're moderate, the country's positions are moving to the right, decidedly. Immigration, we were just talking about this. Perfect example, right? But there's this new, I think, MAGA moderate that does not like associating themselves with either liberals because they think, the Bernie Sanders kind of liberal was a fraud and they sold them out. So I don't want to call myself a liberal, right? And I think we saw that over the last several years already. And that's why the percentage who identify as liberal has fallen, or at least it's a big part of why. And now it's like 22%. Actually, in the electorate, it was like 19. But on the flip side of that, on the other side of that, I think we're seeing these new MAGA moderates, right, that don't want to associate with what they have come to consider traditional conservatism. Like, say, Paul Ryan, or Mike Pence, or Mitt Romney, or any of these idiots who claim the mantle of conservatism, and now people think just terribly about what a conservative is, right? You saw, for instance, what Lila Rose and the March for Life movement, the pro-life movement, did to Donald Trump during the election. Why the hell would anyone, if you support Donald Trump, want to identify with a group that attempted to sabotage him? These people are not overtly political. They're not political like, you guys are political. And even I'm political. They're not like us. And they are calling it how they see it. Once upon a time, they may have called themselves conservative. But now there's been this line drawn between like MAGA Republicanism and what the media is calling traditional Republicanism. And that, quote, traditional Republicanism has the mantle of conservatism. Even though rightfully somebody said yesterday on book club, but he is the most conservative president and that we have ever seen, that any of them have ever put forward. Like, to them, George Bush was a good old conservative boy, right? Paul Ryan just told CNBC in a clip we made fun of 2 weeks ago, his brand of republicanism is very different than mine. They don't always see eye to eye. I am a true conservative. Well, you got Paul Ryan running around saying shit like that. Those people are going to flee from that term real quick. Not that it's even true. It's just that they're the ones. Perception is what matters. Not necessarily what is or what isn't real or right or true. All right, so back to it though. We can see 2.3% said they preferred not to tell us who they voted for, and 2.9% said someone else. Well, of course, third parties did not get that much of the vote share, coupled with prefer not to say. So we know that a nice chunk of those who said someone else, and almost everyone who prefers not to say here, was actually a Harris voter. If you add prefer not to say to Kamala Harris's vote share, you're going to get 46.9%. Still shy a little bit. If you take the difference, about another 1.1, if you take the difference of what remains when you add prefer not to say to Kamala Harris's vote share, if you take the difference between that and her actual vote total away from someone else, a little over a point, you're going to get a much closer realistic, or not even realistic, what was the actual result for third-party vote share. Then someone else is suddenly not 2.9 anymore. And it gets closer, much closer to what the true third-party vote share was. So again, people lie, they get embarrassed. They don't want to admit voting for the loser. We saw this with Joe Biden fairly early in his term. There were a lot of mistakes, a lot of mess ups. As soon as he screwed up on some of the pandemic stuff, or it became clear that, he wasn't going to shut down the virus, not the economy, right? You remember that promise? That started to hurt him. Then people would start to tell us, you know what? I don't want to say who I voted for because it was Joe Biden. They were embarrassed, or they felt like it's a sign of voter remorse. There are people in prefer not to say who actually approve of Donald Trump and say they like him. Someone else and prefer not to say, I will actually combine them and I will show you guys. We need to do that. I'm going to have to build a better crosstab here, which will give you a little bit more information since we're only really concerned about the approval rating anyway. So I'm going to take these new interviews, I'm going to put them into obviously another crosstab, and we'll probably dissect it on probably tomorrow. The boss has spoken. The boss says less time, more shows. Do it at 2 because that's what the data suggests you guys want us to do, right? 12 is a tough slot for a lot of people. And we had a lot of people tell us they can actually catch the tail end of it at work, or, they can listen to it at work. They can't do it around noon. So I think she's right. The only issue we had, of course, is when sometimes I need to go and get the kid from the bus stop. So we won't be able to always do 2 hours. So she just said more shows, less time, starting at 2. Besides, that would make sense because when we do What Are the Odds, everyone will just get used to the shows being at 2. All right. So we did hear you on that. And we got a lot of messages over the last year about potentially moving the showtime a little later in the afternoon. All right. So we heard you guys. She looked at the data. She showed me the data. It's not even close. The shows that air at 2 almost always have not only live viewers, but more viewers who will go and watch it like maybe 3:15 or something. Then they start to listen and they have to go back and watch the whole thing again. It isn't particularly close. The 2 o'clock shows get more. All right. There are also competitors at noon. that you don't have it too. Okay. So again, there it is. People lie, people lie. Let me just pull stuff away. I don't want to show personal identifiable information, which I don't think I'm going to do, but just bear with me real quick. No, right track, wrong track, fallen again. The wrong track continues to fall, and the right direction is, I guarantee, well, I don't guarantee. I suspect that by like next week, right direction will probably be about 40%. All right. Yeah, I really believe that. I do. All right, there's Trump's approval. Oh, and whether or not his approval rating and his favorability were going to start to converge on each other. So we could see his favorability rating starting to increase, but his approval rating was still higher, right? So before I say what it means, all right, actually, I need to take a real quick commercial break. But before I say what it means, I'm going to show you the numbers. All right, so stick around. Don't go anywhere. Let me tell you about our friends over at Freedom Gold first, real quick. I'll pull a Sean. Let me tell you about Sweetamine. Disappear for 15 seconds. Love you, Sean. Love you, brother. Look, whether you've thought about diversifying your portfolio or you're just looking for protection and what is almost assuredly still going to be a volatile time, right? There's a lot of the houses out there, but I'm telling you, the folks over at Freedom Gold are the way to go, guys. The reason I love Freedom Gold is a couple of them, but number one is that they really do care that you have the information you need to make a comfortable and confident decision. All right, there's no boiler room over here. All right. They will definitely sit and talk with you. If you've already called them, you know what I'm talking about. There is no hard sell. Plus, of course, there's a whole lot of the sweeteners they've thrown in there, right? So a lot of these places have 50 grand buy-ins, 20 grand buy-ins, 10K buy-ins are the low ones, right? And even at Freedom Gold, it is 5, but not for you guys. They lowered it to just $500 to get you started, right? You can use the phone number, which is just for us, 888-279-3592, 888-279-3592, or you can go check out the website at freedomgoldusa.com/rich. .com/rich. freedomgoldusa.com/rich. Thank God for descriptions, because the link and the number are both in there. But when you do give them a call, and earnestly, you're interested in talking to them, you're going to get thrown into a raffle and someone's going to win some free silver. If you've already won, there are apparently 2 winners we haven't announced yet. If you've already won, congratulations to you, and I'm very, very happy for you. Even with the reduced buy-in, by the way, you're still, if you open a gold or silver IRA, eligible for a $500 free silver credit for that. It's just incredible deals. No matter what you take advantage of, no matter which one, you're still going to get free shipping and insurance on all orders. It's incredible, right? Again, last time, 888-279-3592, 888-279-3592. Go check out our friends over at Freedom Gold. Going to take a 30-second break, and when we come back, after me taking a swig of my Gatorade, we'll go over the difference between Trump's approval ratings and favorability ratings in the post-ceremony environment, okay? Because we could see them getting closer to each other as he was coming into office, and we wanted to check in and see where they were now. All right, and we'll take a peek at that when we come back. I was going to run that funny little Bugs Bunny thing with JD on it, but instead, we're just going to run the countdown. Stay tuned. Be back in 30 seconds. All right, we're back inside the numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and share them far and wide. If you're on YouTube, it'd be great if you could just mosey on over to Rumble and sign up, subscribe there. It's a huge help for 1 minute of your time. All right, let's dive right into it. Of course, though, the best place to follow us is on Locals right there, peoplespundit.locals.com. All right, let's pull this back up. All right, here's Trump's approval rating. There is no significant deterioration in Donald Trump's approval rating since last week. All right. from the end of the week until Sunday, there was no significant deterioration in his approval rating since the beginning of the prior week, leading into obviously what was it, a day or 2 days after the ceremony. Okay, so from Friday to Sunday, he maintained a 55% approval rating, which is like a tick down. It was 55.5. It's a half a point difference. It's not a significant decline at all. It is what it is. What is, I think, when you're looking at a survey that's got an error rate of 1.7 to 1.9%, looking at that strongly disapprove continuing to fall, it means his intensity index is positive. And it's been positive, but it now ticked a little bit even higher, right? So his intensity index is positive 7.2, all right? Meaning the difference between the percentage of those who strongly approve of the job he's doing, which is 32.2%, 34.2%, and those who strongly disapprove. Look, modest changes here. Modest, but if you're Trump, it's going in the right direction. It tells me that he has staying power here. All right. And we'll see. So you have old Morgan out there on X going, oh, the American public's going to sour on Donald Trump real quick. Well, Morgan, currently, my friend, there is no evidence of that whatsoever. And that's probably because Americans maintained a wide degree of optimism toward the future and towards the possibility that Donald Trump is going to address the major issues that decided the campaign. I'm going to say that again. The reason Trump is more popular and why his approval rating is at least for now, demonstrating staying power is because Americans are optimistic about the future and because Americans are optimistic about his ability to address the major issues that concern them and that decided the 2024 presidential campaign. That continues to be, to this day, the two eyes above all: inflation and immigration. The economy in general, of course, economy and jobs. Number three, they are extremely optimistic about the job market 6 months from now. They are extremely optimistic about their expectations for total family income 6 months from now. They ticked up a little bit since Trump actually was sworn in and took over, but they had already begun to increase their current condition sentiment when Trump was getting ready to be sworn in. So they were still obviously lower than the 6-month outlook, but they were higher than what was when Joe Biden was president and it was unsure who was going to win the presidency. All right. So, I mean, they feel like things are just going to get better and that Trump is actually not going to like break a campaign promise or something. Like, they think he's going to do it. And as long as that's the case, and as long as he has the voter on his side when it comes to what direction they want to move the country in, right? Do they want all of these mass deportations, or are they going to be swayed by Selena Gomez's hysterical crying session in TikTok? They're going to tell Selena to shut the fuck up, and they want people deported, which is why they elected Donald Trump to begin with. They're going to cheer along at the Fox News segments, and they're going to agree with Laura that twits like her, as I'm using Laura's word, not mine, twits like her are literally crying for a man who forced a woman to suck off the barrel of his gun while he sodomized her. They're on his side. It's not 17 anymore. They're not going to believe the kids in cages thing, which is where she went with this. They don't have the credibility to pull on the same thing they did in 17. They don't have it. Americans have been watching. And frankly, you're insulting voters' intelligence a little bit. It's insulting. But they're directionless. And they don't know what else to do. They're falling back on what they know. And that's in part because they are a little bit clueless. In part because they are fanatics. They believe this crazy shit. All right? And it is crazy and fringe. It's not my opinion. It's what the data says. They're fringe. Once upon a time, that may have worked. Oh, the poor children in cages, the splitting of the families. It's not going to work anymore. And to pretend is just like, again, a huge insult. Huge insult. All right, so we have what is this then? 38%, right? 37.7 disapprove to look at the number of undecideds, by the way. Trump left office with like less than 2% of people being undecided about whether or not they approved or disapproved of how he handled the job as president. That's up to 7.3 now. What was it last week? Hold on. I want to check and see. It's got to be pretty close, but I remember commenting that it was up 7 flat. So that's a little tick up, a little tick up, little tick, tick, tick. Meaning people are willing to give him a chance. Again, there are people who we know are lying. They're Harris voters. There's a huge chunk of Democrats who somewhat approve of Trump. It's a whole new world. There was none of that when he left office, folks. None of it. Trump had low single-digit Democratic support in 2020. Among those who approved of him, sometimes it was nil. It was actually remarkable how much of a hive that mind they can keep together. A hive of a mind they can keep together. It really was. Kind of impressive. All right, now let's compare this with the favorability rating. And then after we do, I'm going to tell you what I think this means. All right. And why it's different than the Trump that we're used to polling. All right. So here we go. All right. So here's Trump. 34% very favorable, 19% somewhat favorable. So about 53% again favorable. That's ticking up again. It was like 51 before. And then going into the election, it was like 50. No, it was like 52. It was like 51 going into the election, just above maybe 51, 52. So it's starting to converge with his approval rating, and only 32.5% of a very unfavorable opinion of him. That's interesting because only 27 strongly disapprove. What does that mean? Why is there a 7-point difference, 6.5-point difference? No, sorry, 5.5-point difference. Why is there, if we round, a 6-point difference between those who have a very unfavorable image of him and those who strongly disapprove of him? Well, that's what remains of the voter, the group of people that we used to say, something different about Trump. He has an ability to win people, to win the votes of people who don't like him. All right. The difference between those who strongly approve and those who have a very favorable opinion of him is negligible. 34.2% strongly approve, 33.9 rounded to 34 on both who have a very favorable view of him. So what does that mean? It's not just that they're saying, it's not like it used to be. They're not just saying they strongly approve of him because it's like a policy thing and a policy thing only. Or we used to hear this all the time. I don't really like the son of a bitch, but he's competent. He's a strong leader, right? We would hear things like that. Obviously, this is statistics, and there's always going to be somebody somewhere that's out, we could find someone who would say it, right? But ultimately, if we were to round, 34% of a strong approval of him and 34% of a very favorable image of him. So it's not just that they think he's competent and he's a strong leader. They like him. And that is a significant difference from the Donald Trump 1.0 from 17 to 20. Very, very, very different. Now, retrospective approval, we would ask before, in the period after he left office to when he did, but it really wasn't that like now here we are. He's in office again. So it's much more instructive. 21% somewhat approve, 19% somewhat favorable. Only a 2-point difference. Again, only 2 points represent those who say they somewhat approve, but have a somewhat favorable, who don't have a favorable or whatever opinion of him. So there are pieces of that somewhat unfavorable and very unfavorable, and you can even see it in the difference between 12.1 and 10.7. So you have some of these unfavorable people going over and saying that they somewhat approve, but it is not at all the disparity between these two measurements that we are accustomed to seeing in the era of Trump while polling Donald Trump, as somebody who has been polling him since the moment he came down the escalator. It was always this group, and it was much bigger. We're talking about teens, 14, 16%. I don't like him, but I approve of him. I don't like him, but I would vote for him. That disparity is no longer there. And considering he's risen on both measurements, approval and favorability, it tells you it's real. And it's not just job related. It's not just personality related. It could be one or the other, right? Could technically or could theoretically go either way. It could be that they have a good, they like him, but they're not really liking what he's doing, or they like what he's doing, but they don't really personally like him. And that just both of them, although one more so than the other, contributed to that disparity. But now that disparity is no longer really there, it is totally negligible, especially among the intensity indexes, where it's strongly approved versus strongly favorable, or very favorable, And again, the percentage of people who say that they have a very unfavorable, they really don't dislike him. I mean, they really dislike him, coupled with have a strong disapproval of him. It's fringe now. That was always like 40%, 40 something percent. It's fringe now. It's gone. Can it come back? I mean, I guess anything's possible, folks. Do I expect it to? Not right now. Not if he continues to do what he is doing. He said he was going to break the back of these countries until they comply with his immigration reforms. He's doing it. He said he was going to sue for peace with the Russo-Ukrainian war. He's doing it. Get some hostages out. Stop the killing of both Israeli and Palestinian kids. He's doing it. He may have succeeded fully on all of these things yet. But I mean, my God, go to the cover of Real Clear Politics. There's no less than 7 articles about the things that Donald Trump is doing right now. And one of those articles is making the point that we're making to you right now, which is that this is different because Americans support it. They want him to do this. Right? All right. Well, a perfect example. I don't know if you want to be called out, but perfect example was the healthcare bill, repeal and replace. That's something that was a promise to the base, but the base didn't want that prioritized over immigration, right? They would have much rather seen Trump deal with immigration before healthcare. They squandered that political capital. They failed to even get it done because Krusty McCain put his thumbs down. And they blew all that political capital on something they couldn't even get done. Immigration was not addressed. Not in that manner anyway. He did do executive orders. Although it took him a very long time to do the orders in a drastic fashion the way he's doing it now. And Paul Ryan got his deregulation bills. And right, I mean, he got what he wanted. And the voter got screwed. It's true. On a lot of that stuff. Trump still did an enormous amount. Don't get me wrong. But this is, to me anyway, very clear that he gets it. And he's not playing ball the way he played ball in 2017. Like, look, guys, I know this is your town. I won the election, but this is your town. I understand. Let's, I'm willing to play ball here. You know how it's done. So why don't you take the lead? What do you want to do here? What do you think we can get done first? That's not how he's doing it. He's like, look, this is why I got elected. This is what we're addressing. You don't do it, we're going to steamroll you, bite me, getting it done. Being rewarded for it. All right. Real quick, I will show you something in a second here because I'm gonna do it last minute. And I know she said, shorter with more things, and gonna have to get the kid here soon. But I want to read Rui, who also, by the way, is on Real Clear Politics. He seems to get it that the hour is potentially late here for the Democratic Party. The hills the left will die on, and perhaps it's best that they do. So I have told you before that sometimes the best thing for a party for them to do is to lose. He's arguing here that maybe they need to die and be reborn from the ashes like a left-wing phoenix or something, because they're just not getting it. And he argues that there needs to be moderations. What he's telling you is what I just told you before. He's just going to tell you in a much less animated way, which is that there have to be, and he lays out three. There have to, but there are three policy reversals, changes, platform changes. Like, they cannot be known as the party with this insanity in these areas of policy. Will they do it? Jeez. Let me swap. Nothing coming out of this thing. The first sentence is actually what RCP took and put as the title on their linked site, because that says it all. I mean, he just comes out with the reality of things. The left isn't dead yet, but it's getting there. That's a shame, because the self-identified left played a leading and productive role in the 20th century. Really had that go for you. Like, this is, again, I don't mean to bash him. He's definitely one of the smarter minds on the left wing side of the aisle, but he just doesn't seem to understand, or maybe they just don't want to recognize or acknowledge that many of their successes, what they call successes, are in truth enormous failures. They were successes for them and a small population that represents them. But for the vast majority of Americans in the working class they once claimed to champion, and especially the non-white working class that they claim to champion, it's devastating. Their successes had a devastating impact on these people. The various socialists, social democrats, and radicals that made up this loose aggregation pushed unions and government policy that benefited the working class, helped tame the excesses of capitalism, and provided the shock troops for efforts to end discrimination, ensure equal treatment for all, and protect the environment. That scares the shit out of me, what he just said right there, like it's a good thing. Did you hear? He even used the word shock troops, and he's totally cool with it. On all these fronts, the left made important contributions. I think that's undeniable. They did. The question is whether or not they were positive contributions in the long term. Was Roe v. Wade a positive contribution to our society, or did it sow discord and disunity for over 4 decades? Because of the shock troops just coming in and putting the hammer down. But the left came into the 21st century beaten down. From the Reagan Revolution of the 1980s to the rise of the Third World in the 1990s to the first Bush term and the War on Terror that started the century, it didn't seem like anyone really wanted to hear from the left anymore. Political contention became between the parties and within American politics generally has passed the movement by. And then a sort of revival, sparked initially by the backlash to the Iraq War, a war they supported, by the way. That's why Obama won the nomination, because the front runner, Hillary Rodham Clinton, did something that Barack Obama didn't. She voted for the war. The revival was strengthened by the Great Recession of 08-09 and Obama's historic first election, gathered force through his second term with the rise of Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter. And then it was turbocharged by Bernie Sanders' insurgent candidacy and, of course, the norm-busting election of Donald Trump and his chaotic first term in office. All right, let me just say Bernie Sanders was not insurgent. In fact, the establishment beat Bernie Sanders in a submission. They rigged the democratic process, not once but twice, so Bernie could not win. Suddenly, being on the left was cool again. The moribund Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, spiked to 100,000, mostly young members, from a few thousand aging veterans of the 20th century left. And it wasn't just the DSA. In many circles, a radical critique of American society as structurally racist, hostile to marginalized communities, and embedded in a rapacious capitalist system that will destroy the planet became a sort of conventional wisdom. In this view, opposing Trump had to be joined to a struggle against all these aspects of the oppression, the omnibus, and to social transformation. Otherwise, the oppression would remain even if Trump himself was removed. And by the way, this order he's talking about, especially the government order using the government to do it, really backs up an argument I made on Twitter last night. And I am trying to explain to people over and over again, which is that the modern corporatism of the Democratic Party is just a rebranded form of socialism. Fascism, excuse me. Fascism is really what now embodies the modern Democratic Party. They just call it corporatism. Oh, the establishment is corporatists. Well, a collective order, government coercion over a private sector that has a capitalist veneer, but is really driven by the government, is the economic definition of fascism, where they then tell the private sector, which is a faux private sector, how to produce, how to allocate labor. They control agriculture, manufacturing, healthcare. That is literally the definition of fascism. And by the way, where does the word fascist come from? It's literally from the Roman term, which was actually a name for a symbol, which meant the collective and the collective authority, or the authority of the collective. It's socialism. There's nothing right-wing about fascism at all. Right-wing, of course, in this country means less government-centered solutions. Larger private sector, unburdened by regulations of the government. Like, regulations are meant to sound so great, but what do regulations actually really mean? Government direction. You can do this, you can't do that. You should do this, you should do that. Well, eventually, when the regulations get too overburdensome, you suddenly crept into the realm of fascism and you don't even know how you got there. The government going to Mark Zuckerberg and saying, you have to work with us on this, and you have to censor these people. That's fascism. Going to Twitter at the time, not X, Twitter, and saying, we don't like that Washington Post, that New York Post story. Take their account down and push this story from the Washington Post about that story being called Russian disinformation by 51 intelligence officers. That is fascism. Like the quite literal definition of it. The view spread through sympathetic cultural milieux where it had already had considerable presence: universities, media, the arts, nonprofits, advocacy groups, foundations, and the infrastructure of the Democratic Party itself, redefining what it meant to be on the left. In opposing Trump, who was himself so radical, it seemed only reasonable to be radical in return. Okay, Ruby. So Democrats are only crazy radicals because they're responding to Donald Trump being crazy radicals. Is that your argument? I know, right? Isn't that nuts, son? Isn't that nuts? That's a crazy argument.
I know.
How was school?
It was great. Are you on?
You look adorable. Absolutely, but they can't see you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, folks.
You're adorable. I missed you. Welcome home. Anyway, that's, of course, asinine. Donald Trump would never be Donald Trump. He wouldn't have even had a foothold in the electorate, and he wouldn't appeal to anybody if people weren't in the political establishment's two things. One, radical, and two, ineffective. As a result of the teens drew close drew to close, punctuated by the COVID pandemic and the George Floyd summer of 2020, right? The summer of love. Remember that? The summer of love where everything was burnt down. That wasn't, that wasn't really them. That's Trump's fault. The left was both larger than it had been in a long time and very different from earlier iterations. This was a left that believed America was a white supremacist society, fully bought into the climate catastrophism and equity above social order, good governance and equal opportunity, and thought, quote, no human being is illegal, unquote. They thought it was a good approach to immigration policy, and they were perfectly willing to shout you down if you didn't believe all this stuff, or even if you didn't use the right language when referring to these issues. Not coincidentally, this was also a left with almost no connection to the working class, in stark contrast to the 20th century, the left's origin story. And this left didn't have quite a lot of influence on Biden administration staffing and policies, down to the language officials used to describe their initiatives. To their shock, however, American voters were not delighted with the results, especially the working class. And the left's preferred party, the Democrats, are out on the ear. This would be a great time for the left to recalibrate its approach, right? But are they? To paraphrase George W. Bush, is our leftists learning? Now we're quoting George Bush, a man they once called to be executed at The Hague for war crimes. Oh my God. Sadly, that does not appear to be the case, neither in the evolving intra-party strategic debate after the November election, nor in the reactions to the GOP's priorities and Trump's executive orders is there much evidence of a desire for compromise on the part of the left. Instead, there are signals that there are hills, many hills, they are willing to die on rather than give ground. Here are 3 of the most important hills they are willing to die on, and they probably will. 1. Immigration, border security, deportations. Outside of the economy, no issue hurt the Democrats more in 24 than immigration. I would agree. And the laxness on border security and quasi-open borders policy that resulted in massive waves of illegal immigration was very much a priority and a product of the left. You'd think they'd be rushing to correct that mistake. Nah. That is the best paragraph in this entire piece. Now, I would argue that a lot of these issues do go hand in hand with each other. Lack of wage growth, immigration, people think of. Even when they're thinking of social services, even education, I can't tell you how many black mothers I heard say, what about my boys? What about my kids? Who the hell are all these people they're bringing into the country? I've been voting Democrat for years, and they don't give a shit about me. What about me? What about my kids? What about my community? My people? Is the thanks we get. Take the Laken Riley Act, which just passed Congress. Laken Riley was the Georgia nursing student who was murdered by illegal Venezuelan immigrant Jose Ibarra. Recall that Biden, under pressure from the left, apologized for referring to illegal immigrant Ibarra as illegal, as opposed to the approved nomenclature of undocumented. The legislation named after her provides for the detention of illegal immigrants charged with theft-related crimes, assault on a police officer, or acts causing death or bodily harm to an individual. Rui, you got to do something with your grammar, buddy. Don't hit the publish button before you actually look over it. For Christ's sake, there's 3 spelling errors I have to correct as I'm reading it. And they're grammatical errors, too. Like, you're just forgetting, like, it's police officer, right? Just 12 Democrats in the Senate and 46 Democrats in the House were willing to vote for the Laken Riley Act, with the left heavily concentrated in blue states, conspicuous by its absence. Outside Congress, left reaction was predictable and vitriolic. Sarah Dole, chief campaign officer of the movement organizing group Indivisible, had this to say. Spineless! That's the only word for the Senate Democrats who handed MAGA Republicans a gift they didn't deserve. The Laken Riley Act is a racist, xenophobic attack on immigrants that shreds constitutional rights and hands power to extremists like Ken Paxton, Texas's attorney general, to hijack federal immigration policy. It's not just cruel, it's a train wreck of chaos and bad faith, and yet Senate Democrats caved. First of all, they didn't cave, right? They did not. Of course, they did not cave. John Fetterman himself criticized his party over this. And that's just the Laken Riley Act. That act is merely the opener for a variety of Trump administration moves to drastically tighten up border security and deport many of the illegal immigrants who are currently here, focusing initially on those with criminal records. This is what Miss Gomez is crying about. Somebody tell this simpleton that I think she ate too much sugar on the Mickey Mouse show or wherever the hell she was from. I don't know if she even knows how to read. They're not deporting children and breaking up families, unless, of course, by that, your definition is daddy is a rapist and daddy's going to jail now. So little Juan is not going to be able to stay with his rapist or murdering or both daddy, who will now be deported back to his home country. Rapist daddy or the Hispanic Ted Bundy should never have been here to begin with. That is not the same as breaking up families, and Hispanics agree. Of course, he's got to cite a New York Times poll, which he did before the election to justify his final analysis, which he was wrong about, by the way. He was right about Democrats losing voters, but he really did believe that, or I don't think he believed it. He pushed it. He gave Democrats copium. I actually think it's worse. Just to clear up, I misspoke. Just to clear up what I mean. Rui knew they weren't going to win. Rui knew she was going to get clobbered. This, like, now the switcheroo, and maybe there is a difference in the race, and look, Harris is ahead in the New York Times poll, and come on, Rui. You knew that was bullshit. You wanted it to be true. So you gave people copium. You don't look quite as stupid as, like, Allen or something. So the New York Times poll, 87% overall support for deporting such illegal immigrants, including overwhelming support among surprising groups like Democrats, 83%, Hispanics, 85%. By the way, the same is true of voter ID stuff, folks. Common things the media I would say policies and issues the media commonly refers to as like extreme or racist or xenophobic, same thing. Overwhelming, including of their own party, overwhelming majorities. The simple fact of the matter is that it is impossible to solve the illegal immigration problem without changing the incentive structure for prospective immigrants. And I don't need to get into why he thinks it is, but that's one. Two, identity politics, equity, and trans rights. We don't have to read every single one here. We're out of time. But the contemporary left is deeply invested in these issues. It shows little sign of backing down or compromising on any of them. Take the statement of Ben Wickler, the last favorite candidate for chair of the Democratic National Committee. Quote, "We unite our coalition by making sure everyone's at the table. As DNC chair, our leadership team will fill up with our full coalition, Black, Latino, Native, AANHPI, I don't even know what the hell that means anymore, LGBTQ, youth, interfaith, ethnic, rural, veteran, and disability representation." Oh my God. I know, I can't even get on with it. But the bottom line is you get it. And I will just say this. The Times poll that he mentioned before, 80% of the working class respondents oppose gender birth males playing in women's sports, and 75% oppose allowing puberty blockers and hormone therapy to be prescribed to anyone under 18. Well, of course. And to me, it's stunning that they were actually surprised by the results of the New York Times poll. I really, really, really thought that, I was genuinely stunned. I'm going to say it again. He goes on a tangent here. I'm just going to say this in this general rule of thumb, and it's the simplest way that I can explain it to you guys. The American public does not see the trans issue as a civil rights issue. They don't. To the vast majority of Americans, this is a mental health issue. It is not a civil rights issue it's not a civil rights moment to be celebrated. To watch a biological male who's deluded into thinking he's a female beat the shit out of a biological female in the Olympics and get a freaking medal for it. Americans believe they're deluded. They're sick and they need help. And that this is largely a fad, because that, in fact, is not only what common sense would have dictated us all to think immediately, but that is actually what the science is suggesting now. This is a social fad. And it's one that we need to study and address immediately, because this is sick and the American public does not view it as anything less or anything more. Civil rights, my ass. This isn't Rosa Parks trying to get a better spot on the bus. They're delusional. And they're hurting people. And if you say anything about it, you're a bigot. If you're a woman, a true woman's rights proponent, right? Or maybe me. You're an old school male who doesn't think putting a shiny name on wife beating makes it anything other than wife beating. Or woman beating in that case. Officer shows up to your house. You know what? Officer, today I identified as a female. And I just wanted to box my wife on equal footing. Okay? Don't take me in, officer. I identify as a female. Get the hell out of here. 3, the climate, catastrophism, renewals, Uber allies, net zero. Trump has thrown down the gauntlet to the left on climate and energy issues. In his speech and his executive orders, he has made clear his intention to untether domestic energy production from regulatory and permitting obstacles and de-emphasize Biden administration policies centered around renewable and electric vehicles. I don't even need to read any more here. All I can tell you is this, and this is anecdotal, but I'm telling you, Rui is right. This was a big issue. Laura and I, as it turns out, I had no idea they were named the #1 dealership in the state, but we go to this place, right? I don't want to blow them up here, but we go to this dealership. I'm thinking of leasing from a different car maker, you know, a different company. I think I'm done with the one I'm long leased from. And he was telling me about what was on the lot now, that was 2024, and then the risk of waiting in 2025, right? They didn't even know what was going to be released. They didn't even know. And they were all sitting around praying. And this is an older middle-aged African-American man voting for Donald Trump because his job depended on him. They were not ready for electric vehicles, and they had different models getting ready to push onto the floor that they don't even believe are worth buying. They don't. The technology isn't there, and the demand, the market is not there. And this is a guy who literally had to vote for Donald Trump for the simple fact, even though he's an older black male, meaning, remember, we talk about this a lot, the civil rights mindset is still locked in his mind, right? But to him, he won't sell any freaking cars next year. He won't sell any cars. Guy was praising Elon Musk up and down. He knows he's invested in it. He'd like to see it, but it's not time yet. He's like, got to appreciate a guy who's literally spending money against his own interest. He could easily back the Democrats, have them push out shit that he made, force it on the public. Have the government attempt to make a market. By the way, fascism, by definition, or Trump could win. And while it would personally hurt Elon, obviously he thought it was the right thing for the country. So it definitely had an impact. That's an anecdote, of course, but all data is anecdotal. All data is anecdotal. All right, by the way, peep Trump's approval rating when this other one comes out too among non-white voters. It's astonishing. We need to do a cross, actually. That's how I'm probably going to even release this. I'm not even going to release it with a press release. It's a follow-up poll, and I'm just going to put it out there with a couple of different nested crosstabs that I think are valuable. One is the number of people who would not tell us who they voted for, and then those who said that they voted for somebody else we know is inflated. We're going to look at those numbers and see, where are they on Trump? You know, what percentage of that 2.9% actually says they approve of him now, right? Big, I mean, glaring red flag for Democrats, and they are not doing or taking Rui's advice whatsoever, and they're going to pay a price for it unless Republicans are so stupid they can do their job for them. All right, it's 3:42. We're going to boogie. Like I said, and now is the time. Less time at once, more frequent and different time. Don't forget, guys. Okay, don't forget. The boss has spoken. It is done. We've been kind of warning you this was going to happen for a while. I already could see, like, I didn't need her to go through this deep dive. I could already see that time slot was working better, and it's also easier for us to promote our stuff in shorter blocks. You know, not everybody wants to sit there and watch a 2-hour show, you know? But there will be ones that do go over because I simply cannot fit everything. And that's what I was trying to tell her. Like, look at the amount of material daily. We didn't even get to talk about Pete Hegseth. Such a big deal. Of course, we'll talk about it with Sean on Wednesday. All right. And I'll give you guys a little inside story about how one Republican senator was scared back to his corner. It was about to screw you over. Yeah, what else? I think that's it. Just keep your eye on, of course, on locals, and we'll give you the data as soon as I get it done. Like I said, the book club, they're both up now. I feel like I'm missing something. But if I am, that's what locals is for. That's what social media is for. I'll tweet it out. I'll post it on locals, etc., etc. Of course, links to all of our sponsors for the show today are in the description, as is the public polling project. Let's have a conversation about that a little bit later. We're not going to do that now. All right. But with that being said, I will leave you there. Don't forget to like the videos if you like them and share them far and wide. All right. And I will see you guys tomorrow. All the best. Thanks for watching Inside the Nut. New song coming too? New song coming. Maybe we should take this one and just mold it around a little bit. I've grown partial to this one. Little Hendrix like in there. All right, guys. See you tomorrow. Don't do anything stupid. Don't do anything I wouldn't do.